Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin today with a simple idea, one that might just change everything for you. You don't lack discipline, you lack a philosophy. Now, someone might say, Jim, I've tried being disciplined. I really have. And I believe you. Most people try to be disciplined the way they try to diet. 3 good days, 2 bad days, and 1 day where they say, let's just start over on Monday. But discipline isn't the issue. The real issue is the set of ideas you're living your life by. Because if you fix the thinking, the doing becomes automatic. But if the thinking is off, you can try as hard as you like, you'll still end up in the same place. See, every one of us, whether we know it or not, is guided by a philosophy, and that philosophy decides how you handle your day, how you spend your time, how you treat your body, how you use your mind, and how you shape your future. Some people have a philosophy of comfort first, and their results reflect it. Others have a philosophy of growth first, and their results reflect that. But here's the secret. Your philosophy is always running in the background like a little unseen engine that keeps your life going in one direction or another. And if the philosophy is wrong, no amount of discipline will save the day. Now, I know many people who say, Jim, I set goals every year. Wonderful. But goals do not determine your future. Philosophy does. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your philosophy. That's what we're going to talk about today. Not hacks, not tricks, not motivation. Motivation is like a warm shower, feels good, but you have to keep turning the water back on. What we want is something that lasts, something that stays, something that shapes your life whether you feel motivated or not. By the time we finish this session, I want you to think differently, because once you think differently, everything else changes automatically. Your habits change, your discipline changes, your results change, and it all starts with one question. What philosophy is driving your life right now? If you don't decide it on purpose, it gets created by accident. And most people are living by philosophies they never even chose. Today, we're going to fix that. We're going to craft a philosophy that gives discipline a purpose, gives effort a direction, and gives you the power to follow through, not just for a day or a week, but for a lifetime. That's the real secret of consistency. Not trying harder, but thinking better. Now, let's begin shaping the foundation, because once we get the thinking right, the doing becomes the easiest part of all. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. Your personal philosophy, this set of ideas you carry around, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, is the master program of your life. It decides everything. What you notice, what you ignore, what you attempt, what you avoid, what you pursue, and what you postpone. It's the steering wheel of your life. And what most people never realize is that you don't live your life as it is, you live your life as you are through the philosophy you've accepted. Let me give you an example. 2 people get the same advice. Read a little every day. One says, that makes sense. I'll do it. The other says, I don't have time. Now, did the advice fail? No. What failed was the philosophy. One person has the philosophy of small improvements over time. The other has the philosophy of I'll start when life gets easier. And that little difference becomes huge over a year, enormous over 5, and absolutely life-changing over 10. You see, you can hand 2 people the same opportunity, the same tools, the same morning, the same 24 hours. But if their philosophies differ, their results will be worlds apart. That's why some people turn their life around with 1 idea, and others collect 100 ideas, and nothing changes. It's not the idea. It's the philosophy the idea falls on. Here's a principle to remember. People do not behave out of discipline, they behave out of belief. If you believe excellence is optional, your discipline will be optional. If you believe comfort is king, you'll stay comfortable. But if you believe that discipline builds freedom, that effort compounds, that small steps matter, you'll act accordingly. Your philosophy whispers instructions all day long, and most people listen without even realizing it. Some people live by a philosophy of limitations. People like me don't do well. This is just the way I am. It's too late for me. And they wonder why nothing improves. Others live by a philosophy of possibilities. I can learn. I can change. I can develop the skills I need. And their life reflects that belief. Here's an idea you might write down. Your philosophy decides your future long before your discipline ever gets involved. You don't lose consistency because you're weak. You lose it because your philosophy doesn't insist on consistency. You don't fail because you lack willpower. You fail because your philosophy permits excuses. Your philosophy is the soil. Discipline is the seed. If the soil is bad, the seed doesn't grow. You don't fix the fruit, you fix the root. So before we talk about habits or routines or schedules or systems, we must look at the foundation. Because if your foundation is built on maybe, your life becomes a long series of almost. But if your foundation is built on I must, life becomes a long series of progress. And the good news? Philosophy is learnable, adjustable, upgradable. And once you upgrade it, everything else in your life begins to rise as well. Now, with that foundation in mind, let's talk about where most people go wrong and why they keep trying harder but end up with the same results year after year. Now, let me share with you one of the great misunderstandings about success, one that keeps people frustrated year after year. Most people believe the answer is simply to try harder. When life isn't changing, they push a little more, grind a little longer, clench their fists, tighten their jaw, and say, this time I really mean it. And they do mean it. But the problem is not sincerity. The problem is strategy. Trying harder without thinking better is like pushing on a locked door. You can strain, you can sweat, you can put all your effort behind it, but if it opens by pulling, effort is not your answer. Understanding is. And that's how most people live. They try to fix their life with effort when the problem is in the philosophy. Their thinking, not their trying, is the issue. Let me put it this way. You cannot behave consistently in a way that contradicts your philosophy. You can force it for a day or a week, maybe even a month if you're stubborn, but eventually you will return to the level of thinking you never upgraded. If you believe you're inconsistent, you'll act inconsistent. If you believe you're unlucky, you'll find evidence. If you believe growth is optional, you'll postpone it whenever life feels comfortable. This is why people restart the same goals year after year. New planner, new routine, new motivation, same philosophy. And the old philosophy always wins. It's like trying to run new software on old hardware. It freezes, crashes, and sends you back to default. Have you ever wondered why two people start the same habit at the same time, but one quits and one continues? It's not discipline. It's not talent. It's not their calendar or their schedule. It's philosophy. One person says, this is important. The other says, I'll do it when it feels right. One says, growth is a priority. The other says, growth is a preference. And preferences disappear the moment life gets inconvenient. You see, the average person tries to fix inconsistency with emotion. They wait for inspiration, energy, excitement. The exceptional fix inconsistency with philosophy. They build a way of thinking that instructs them, guides them, demands of them. That's why they stay consistent even when they don't feel like it. Most people are trying to build skyscraper results on cottage foundations. They want extraordinary outcomes with ordinary beliefs. They want uncommon success with common thinking. And life simply doesn't work that way. Remember this, discipline collapses when your philosophy does not support it. You can coach your habits all day long, but if your philosophy quietly whispers, it's fine to skip, the habit will lose. You can fight your impulses as long as you like, but if your philosophy says, comfort is the goal, comfort will always win. So the real mistake is not lack of effort, it's lack of understanding. The foundation hasn't been built, the philosophy hasn't been shaped, and without the right philosophy, you can't succeed consistently. Now, the good news is this. Once you change the philosophy, you don't have to fight so hard. You don't have to push yourself every morning. You don't have to rely on willpower or weather or mood or motivation. A strong philosophy carries you. It removes the debate. It simplifies the day. And it gives discipline a reason to exist. So the question becomes, how do you rewrite your philosophy? How do you upgrade the thinking that drives the doing? Let's talk about that next. Now that we understand the problem, let's talk about the solution. And the solution is not complicated. It doesn't require a miracle. It doesn't require waking up tomorrow as a brand new person. No, the shift begins with something much simpler, rewriting your personal philosophy. Your philosophy is not fixed. It's not destiny. It's not carved into stone. You can change it. You can upgrade it. You can design it. And the moment you do, everything else begins to shift with it. Your habits, your discipline, your results, your future. But you must consciously pick the ideas you intend to live by. Jim Rohn used to say, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. And that line has carried thousands of people out of frustration and into progress for one reason. It changes the philosophy. It turns you from a victim of circumstances into the architect of your own life. It moves the responsibility from out there to in here. And once that shift occurs, discipline becomes a natural consequence, not a forced effort. So how do we rewrite a philosophy? Let me give you 3 simple questions. 3 questions that shape the way you think, the way you act, and ultimately the way you live. Answer these 3 honestly, and you'll begin crafting a philosophy that supports consistency instead of sabotaging it. Question number 1. What do I believe about effort? Some people believe effort is punishment. Others believe it is investment. One sees effort as something to avoid. The other sees it as something to embrace. The first person stops whenever it gets hard. The second person begins whenever it gets hard. And guess who wins? Not the one with talent, but the one with a philosophy that says, effort is the bridge to everything I want. Question number 2. What do I believe about discomfort? Now, if your philosophy says comfort is the goal, then every difficult task becomes an enemy. But if your philosophy says discomfort is the price for growth, suddenly discomfort becomes a signal that you're on the right track. Most people stop the moment it feels unpleasant. The few keep going because their philosophy tells them discomfort is not danger, it's development. Question number 3. What do I believe about myself? Now, here's the big one. Because you can't act like a champion while believing you're an underdog, you can't live consistent while believing you're inconsistent. You can't follow through while believing you always quit. Your behavior will inevitably match your identity. So you must choose the identity first. I am the kind of person who follows through. You choose it, and then you act until it becomes true. Remember this, beliefs create behavior, and behavior creates results. But it all starts with the beliefs. And beliefs can be chosen today, right now. You can decide that your new philosophy will be effort is valuable, discomfort is useful, discipline is honorable. Growth is essential, and you are fully capable. Once you select a new philosophy, something wonderful starts to happen. Your mind begins aligning with your decisions. Your energy begins matching your goals. Your actions begin reflecting your priorities. And discipline, this thing you once forced, starts to feel natural. This is the great shift. Not working harder, but thinking better. Not tightening your grip, but changing your guidance. Because once your philosophy demands consistency, your behavior simply follows instructions. Now that we've laid that groundwork, let's talk about the first major principle that turns philosophy into action, the principle that separates a wish from a commitment. Now let's talk about something absolutely essential if you want consistency to last not for a day, not for a week, but for a lifetime. And that is the power of a decision, not a hope, not a preference, not a let's see how I feel tomorrow. A real, final, unshakable decision. Jim Rohn used to say, a decision sets the direction. Discipline only keeps you on the path. And that's one of the most important concepts you'll ever learn. Because most people never really decide. They kind of decide. They sort of decide. They make what I call a conditional decision, the kind that lasts until it rains, until they're tired, until somebody invites them out for dinner, or until life gets inconvenient. And that's why discipline feels so hard for them. They are trying to maintain with discipline what they didn't establish with decision. Let me explain it this way. Discipline is the servant. Decision is the master. Without the master, the servant has no instruction. If you haven't truly decided, discipline becomes a negotiation every morning. Should I or shouldn't I? Do I feel like it today, maybe tomorrow? And after enough negotiations, discipline loses every time. But once you've made a real decision, oh, that's different. A real decision removes the debate. It closes the back door. It ends the internal argument. Once you decide, you don't decide again. You don't revisit it every week. You don't ask your mood for permission. You don't check the weather. You simply follow through because the decision already settled the matter. Think of someone who decides to get healthy. Not someone who wishes for it, or hopes for it, or talks about it endlessly, but someone who decides. That person no longer wonders, should I exercise today? The answer is already built into the philosophy. They don't think, should I eat better? The decision has already set the rules. The only question left is how to carry out what's already been chosen. That's why decision is more powerful than discipline. Discipline fluctuates. Some days you feel strong, some days you don't. But decision stands like a pillar. It doesn't move with mood. It doesn't bend with circumstance. And that's why a single decision truly made can redirect the next 10 years of your life. Most people want results without responsibility, change without commitment, success without sacrifice. They want the reward, but they don't want the finality of decision. But ladies and gentlemen, life does not respond to half decisions. Life opens its doors when you say, this is it. This is the line. I'm done wishing. I'm done dabbling. I'm done being almost committed. From this point forward, I am the person who follows through. And here's the beautiful part. Once you make that kind of decision, discipline stops feeling like a battle. It becomes automatic. You've changed the identity, and now the behavior simply follows its new leader. If discipline is a struggle for you, don't try to muster more discipline. Create a deeper decision. That's the root. That's the foundation. And once the decision is made, really made, the discipline becomes a natural extension of who you've decided to become. Now that we understand the power of decision, let's move to the next major principle, one that Jim Rohn taught so often and so clearly, how to design your life so well that discipline becomes almost unnecessary. Now let's move to one of the most powerful ideas Jim Rohn ever taught one that separates the people who struggle with discipline from the people who no longer need to think about it. And that is the principle of design. Design your life in such a way that the path of progress is easier than the path of procrastination. Most people are trying to muscle their way to success. They wake up every day with the same thought, I've got to push myself, I've got to force myself. But force is the lowest form of power. Force is exhausting. And if you rely on force, you'll quit the moment you run out of energy, which, for most people, is sometime between breakfast and lunch. But design is different. Design removes the need for discipline by making success simpler and failure harder. Think about that. Instead of waking up every morning asking, do I have enough willpower today? Imagine waking up in an environment that helps you succeed automatically. Jim Rohn used to say, don't major in minor things. And one of the great mistakes people make is trying to discipline their behavior instead of designing their environment. The environment wins every time. If your environment is full of distractions, temptations, noise, clutter, and demands, discipline doesn't stand a chance. But if your environment is structured, simple, purposeful, and aligned with your goals, discipline becomes almost unnecessary. Let me give you a few examples. If you want to read more, don't tell yourself, I should read more. Put the book on your pillow. That's design. If you want to work out, don't say, I need to get motivated. Lay out your clothes the night before. That's design. If you want to eat healthier, don't promise yourself you'll resist temptation. Remove the temptation from the house. That's design. If you want to create better habits, don't rely on inspiration. Simplify the steps so much that it becomes easier to do it than to skip it. That's design. See how this works? Design takes the burden off discipline. If you create the right structure, discipline becomes a helper, not a hero. And that is the great secret. Discipline is fragile, design is strong. Let me give you a Rohn-style line. Your environment is voting for your future every day. The question is, which way is it voting? For most people, their environment is voting against them. Their phone is designed for distraction. Their schedule is designed for interruptions. Their kitchen is designed for overeating. Their bedroom is designed for staying up too late. Their habits are designed by accident, and they wonder why discipline feels impossible. But the few design their days with intention. They design their mornings. They design their workspace. They design their routines. They design their associations. They design their inputs. And because their environment is aligned with their ambition, discipline becomes the path of least resistance. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the simple truth. You don't need more discipline. You need fewer obstacles. When something is easy to begin and simple to continue, consistency becomes effortless. When something is difficult to start and easy to postpone, consistency becomes impossible. So if you want your life to change, don't start with more pressure. Start with better design. Simplify your commitments. Remove the friction. Build visual cues. Reduce choices. Automate the simple things. And create an environment that pulls you toward your goals faster than your excuses can pull you away. Design is the architecture of discipline. And once the architecture is strong, discipline becomes a natural part of the structure. Now that we've talked about decision and design, we need to address another major pillar. Why meaning is the fuel that makes discipline last for decades, not days. Now let's talk about the great engine behind all lasting discipline, meaning. If decision sets the direction and design clears the path, then meaning provides the fuel. Without meaning, discipline is a chore. With meaning, discipline becomes a privilege. Jim Rohn used to say, reasons come first, answers come second. And that line has enough power to transform anyone's life because it reminds us that the why is always stronger than the how. People don't quit because the task is too hard. They quit because the meaning isn't strong enough. They lose the reason, and when the reason fades, the discipline follows. Let me give you a little philosophy. There is nothing more powerful than a human being with a reason. You can take away their comfort, their routine, even their confidence, but if their reason is alive, they will rise again. But a person without a reason, you can give them every tool, every strategy, every motivational video, and nothing sticks. Why? Because they have nothing to attach the discipline to. So let me ask you a question worth answering. Why do you want to change? Not the fancy answer, not the Instagram answer, the real one, the personal one, the one that makes you emotional if you sit with it long enough. That reason, that honest, unpolished, deeply human reason is the root of consistent discipline. Some people build their discipline around small reasons. I want to look a little better. I want to be a little more productive. I want to read a little more. And small reasons produce small commitment. But others build discipline around great reasons. I want to become someone my children can admire. I want to break the cycle my family has lived in for generations. I want to build something I can be proud of at the end of my life. And great reasons produce unstoppable momentum. Let me give you a Jim Rohn style story. I once asked a man why he suddenly became consistent after years of inconsistency. He said, Jim, I finally had a big enough reason. His doctor had given him a warning. Change your habits or your health will disappear. Something shifted in him, not because the task got easier, but because the meaning got clearer. Once he knew why, the how became automatic. Meaning changes the emotional equation. Meaning transforms discipline from drudgery into duty. Meaning turns effort from something you endure into something you embrace. Meaning turns the impossible into the inevitable. See, when your reason is strong, discomfort becomes acceptable. When your reason is weak, discomfort becomes unbearable. With strong meaning, you wake up earlier not because you have to, but because you want to. You read not because someone told you to, but because you've decided that the person you are becoming demands better input. You stay on track, not because you're perfect, but because you know what's at stake. Let me give you something to write down. When the reason is clear, the discipline is easy. Most people have goals with no reasons. That's why they fall off. A reasonless goal cannot sustain you through resistance. But a meaningful goal, a goal tied to identity, to purpose, to legacy, creates a level of discipline that surprises even you. So here's your challenge. List your reasons. Big ones, honest ones, real ones. Don't decorate them. Don't filter them. Just find what matters. When you attach discipline to meaning, consistency becomes the natural expression of something deeper inside you. Now that we have the philosophy, the decision, the design, and the meaning in place, it's time to combine it all to build a complete system you can use every single day of your life. Now let's take everything we've learned, your philosophy, your decisions, your design, your reasons, and let's build it into a system you can actually use. Because ideas are wonderful, principles are powerful, but if they never leave your notebook, they never change your life. Jim Rohn used to say, don't let your learning lead to knowledge. Let your learning lead to action. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. Turn wisdom into structure, structure into behavior, and behavior into a new identity. Let me give you a simple framework, a Rohn-style framework that ties everything together. 6 pieces. Not complicated, not overwhelming, but enough to reshape the way you live every single day. Number 1, decide once. A real decision, as we said earlier, removes future decisions. If you decide to read daily, that's the decision. If you decide to get healthy, that's the decision. The daily execution is no longer a debate, it's just the fulfillment of what's already been settled. Remember, a strong philosophy makes the decision, discipline carries it out. Number 2, design the environment. Your surroundings should support your becoming. Place your priorities in your path. Put your distractions at a distance. If you want to read, put the book where your excuses can't hide. If you want to exercise, put your shoes where your laziness can see them. If you want to create, design a space where creativity feels welcome. Your environment can either fight you or fuel you. Design it to fuel you. Number 3, define the reasons. Put your reasons everywhere. You can see them on a mirror, on a wall, on a card you keep in your pocket. When you forget the reason, you abandon the routine. But when the reason is always in sight, you don't ask, do I feel like it? You say, this is who I must become. Your reasons build emotional power. Emotional power builds consistency. Number 4, develop small disciplines. Don't try to overhaul your entire life in a week. Start with tiny disciplines that prove something to yourself. 2 pages of reading, 10 minutes of exercise, 5 minutes of reflection, 1 daily promise you keep. Jim Rohn said, a few small disciplines practiced every day will lead to big achievements gained over time. Don't chase intensity, chase consistency. Intensity starts fast, consistency finishes strong. Number 5, document your progress. The mind forgets victories. The mind erases progress. So you must record it, keep a journal, track your days, review your week, ask the questions, what did I do well? What needs improving? What did I learn? What can I adjust? Reflection sharpens direction. Documentation builds self-trust. A person who keeps score becomes a person who keeps going. Number 6, delete what distracts. You can't live a focused life in a distracting world unless you actively remove the noise. Turn off what weakens you. Set boundaries on what drains you. Reduce the commitments that don't move you toward your purpose. You can't become powerful if you stay surrounded by the things that made you average. Jim Rohn said, you must learn to say no to the things that don't serve you so you can say yes to the things that do. Now let me tie this together. When you decide, you break the old pattern. When you design, you support the new direction. When you define, you fuel the journey. When you develop, you build momentum. When you document, you strengthen belief. When you delete, you protect the progress. And when you combine these 6 pieces, something remarkable begins to happen. Your identity shifts. The person who used to quit starts to follow through. The person who used to delay starts to initiate. The person who used to wait for inspiration starts to move with intention. Your habits change, your results change, and eventually life begins to cooperate with the person you are becoming. Remember this, you don't get consistent because you try harder, you get consistent because you build a life that demands consistency from you. You create a philosophy so clear, a structure so strong, and a meaning so compelling that inconsistency simply has no place to live. This is how thought becomes action. This is how action becomes identity. This is how identity becomes destiny. Now, let's bring it all home. Let's talk about the final shift, the moment your new philosophy begins shaping the rest of your life. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring this all together. Today, we haven't just talked about discipline. We haven't talked about motivation or willpower or those bursts of energy people try to rely on. No, we've spoken about something far more foundational, the philosophy that drives your life. Because discipline is not the root, discipline is the fruit. And if you want better fruit, you must tend to the roots. The greatest mistake people make is trying to change their behavior while keeping the same philosophy. It doesn't work. You cannot outrun the logic you live by. Whatever you truly believe about yourself, about effort, about discomfort, about possibilities, that belief shapes your behavior long before willpower ever gets involved. But here is the beautiful truth. You can rewrite your philosophy. You can create a new set of rules, a new way of thinking, a new standard for yourself. You can decide that from this day forward, you will live by design instead of default. From this day forward, you will look for reasons instead of excuses. From this day forward, you will honor the decisions you make, not the moods you feel. If you take anything from this message, let it be this: your future does not begin when you change your habits. It begins when you change your philosophy. Because once the philosophy changes, the habits naturally follow. The decisions become simpler. The discipline becomes easier. The days become clearer. And slowly, quietly, almost without notice, you become the kind of person who follows through. Jim Rohn often said, if you want the next 5 years to be better than the last 5, you must become better. Not the government, not your job, not the weather you. And that's where your new philosophy begins, with personal responsibility, with the realization that you hold the pen, you set the direction, you build the habits, you shape the meaning, you decide the person you will become. So ask yourself today, what will my new philosophy be? Will it be a philosophy of comfort or a philosophy of growth? A philosophy of excuses or a philosophy of responsibility? A philosophy of hesitation or a philosophy of action? A philosophy of someday or a philosophy of today? Because the philosophy you choose, consciously or unconsciously, becomes the life you live. Your job now is simple. Choose the philosophy that creates the future you want. Decide once, design your environment, define your reasons, develop small disciplines, document your progress, delete distractions, and walk confidently into the next chapter of your life, knowing that you're guided by principles strong enough to carry you to the finish line. And remember this as you go. You don't get in life what you want, you get in life what you become. So become the person whose philosophy demands excellence. Become the person whose habits reflect intention. Become the person whose future is shaped by clarity, not chance. Become the person who follows through because that's who you've decided to be. Rewrite the philosophy and you rewrite the future. And the future, my friends, is waiting for you to begin.